Act 1. The Discovery. The surgical suite fell silent as Dr. Rebecca Winters froze, forceps suspended midair, her eyes wide with disbelief. What she had extracted from Sarah Mitchell's back wasn't a typical melanoma. It wasn't a benign growth. It was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist in human tissue. "Oh my God," Nurse Patricia whispered, then screamed, stumbling backward until she hit the instrument tray, sending metal clattering across the sterile floor. The sound echoed through the operating room like a gunshot. Through the observation window, Sarah's husband James pressed his weathered hands against the glass, his wedding ring catching the harsh fluorescent light. He'd known something was wrong with that mole for years, but never this. Never something that could make a veteran surgical nurse of 30 years scream in absolute horror. "Get Dr. Thornton in here now," Dr. Winters commanded, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. She stared at what she'd just removed, her medical training wrestling with the impossibility before her eyes. What had been growing inside Sarah Mitchell's back for 45 years since Vietnam? And more importantly, was it too late to save her? Before we continue with what the doctors discovered, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's go back to where this nightmare began. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah Mitchell stood before the bathroom mirror in her modest 2-story home in Millfield, Michigan, 3 blocks from Lake Michigan. At 65, she still carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. First as a battlefield nurse in Vietnam, though no one knew that, and then as an elementary school teacher for 30 years. She twisted awkwardly, trying to see the dark spot between her shoulder blades that had been there for as long as she could remember. The mole had always been there, unchanging, unremarkable, just another mark on aging skin. But lately, something had shifted. "Sarah, you need to get that checked," James called from the bedroom, where he was getting dressed for their anniversary dinner. After 46 years of marriage, he knew his wife's stubborn streak better than anyone. "It's been there forever, James," Sarah dismissed, pulling on her robe. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Over the past 6 months, she'd noticed the mole darkening, its edges becoming irregular, almost jagged. Sometimes late at night, she swore she could feel it warming against her skin, pulsing with her heartbeat. And the dreams had started. Nightmares of Vietnam, of the field hospital, of things she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they'd happened to someone else. Their daughter Emma, an emergency physician in Chicago, had been more insistent during her last visit 2 weeks ago. She caught a glimpse of the growth when Sarah was changing and her face had gone pale. "Mom, that doesn't look normal," Emma had said, her doctor's voice replacing her daughter's tone. "Promise me you'll see a dermatologist." "Soon," Sarah had promised, then promptly ignored the promise. She'd spent her entire adult life avoiding doctors, avoiding questions about her medical history, avoiding anything that might unearth the past she'd worked so hard to bury. But tonight, on their 46th anniversary, everything changed. James emerged from the bathroom, still fit at 67, his silver hair catching the lamplight. "Need help with that necklace?" he asked, moving behind her. Sarah nodded, lifting her hair. As James fastened the clasp, his fingers brushed against her back, and he froze. "Sarah," he said carefully, "when did this get so large?" "When did what?" she started, but James was already reaching for his phone, turning on the camera. "Let me take a picture. You need to see this." When he showed her the image, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The mole had transformed into something nightmarish. What had been a dark, roughly circular spot about the size of a pencil eraser had grown into something larger, with irregular borders reaching outward like grasping fingers. The center had risen from her skin, creating a domed structure with a texture that looked almost alive. "Oh God," she whispered. "We're calling the doctor first thing tomorrow," James said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "No more putting this off." That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay awake, feeling the growth on her back like a brand, a reminder of everything she'd tried to forget. In the darkness, she could almost hear the helicopter rotors, smell the blood and antiseptic of the field hospital, feel the weight of young soldiers dying in her arms. And she remembered the day near Quang Tri when everything went wrong. The next morning, Dr. Grayson took one look at Sarah's back, and his jovial demeanor evaporated. He was a semi-retired physician who'd known the Mitchells for 20 years, and Sarah had never seen his face so serious. "I'm referring you to a dermatologist immediately," he said, already reaching for his phone. "Dr. Rebecca Winters. She's young but brilliant, just moved back to the area after practicing in Boston. I'm calling her office personally to get you in this week." "Is it that serious?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Dr. Grayson met her eyes directly. "I don't want to speculate, Sarah, but this needs expert attention. Today, if possible." In the car ride home, Sarah stared silently out the window at the snow-covered landscape. James reached across the console to take her hand. "It'll be okay," he said, though uncertainty edged his voice. Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was finally catching up with her. That bullet she'd felt tear in her back in 1971. The one the field medic had said was just superficial shrapnel, the one that had supposedly healed, had never really left her, had it? That night, Sarah made a decision. She retrieved an old shoebox from the back of her closet, hidden beneath winter sweaters James never touched. Inside were things she'd kept secret for decades. Her nursing credentials from the Army, faded photographs of her unit, a Purple Heart she'd never told anyone about, and a sealed letter she'd written 20 years ago but never had the courage to share. She sat on the edge of the bed, turning the Purple Heart over in her hands. She'd received it for injuries sustained during that incident near Quang Tri, but accepting it had felt like a lie. How could she be honored for a wound received while trying to stop something that should never have happened? "Sarah," James appeared in the doorway, his eyes falling on the items spread across the bed. "What is all this?" She looked up at her husband, the man she'd loved for 46 years, the man she'd never fully trusted with the truth about who she'd been before they met. "James," she said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Act 2. The Secret. Dr. Rebecca Winters' office was modern and calming, with blue walls and sleek furniture that seemed designed to ease anxiety. It didn't work. Sarah sat rigidly in the examination chair, James beside her, as Dr. Winters studied the growth with a magnifying instrument. The young doctor's expression grew more concerned with each passing second. "Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Winters said carefully, "how long have you had this growth?" "There's been a mole there since Vietnam," Sarah admitted. "I was a field nurse. I came home in '72. Dr. Winters looked up sharply. "You were wounded in Vietnam?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "There was an incident near Quang Tri. Took some shrapnel. The medic patched me up, said it was superficial. By the time we got back to base, the wound had closed." "And you never had it properly examined? Never had imaging done?" "I just wanted to forget Vietnam ever happened," Sarah said quietly. "When I came home, I changed careers, changed everything. I became a teacher instead of a nurse. Started over." Dr. Winters pulled on latex gloves, her professional demeanor firmly in place. "I'm going to examine this more closely, and then I'd like to do a biopsy today. The structure is highly unusual." As Dr. Winters probed the edges of the growth, Sarah winced. "It's been hurting lately," she admitted. "And sometimes, this sounds crazy, but sometimes I swear I can feel it moving." Instead of dismissing this, Dr. Winters nodded. Movement sensations aren't uncommon with certain types of growths. The surrounding nerve endings can create that impression. The biopsy was quick but uncomfortable. Dr. Winters frowned as she extracted the tissue sample. "This is denser than I expected," she muttered, almost to herself. "I'm going to take a second sample from a different area." The second sample seemed to trouble her even more. She labeled both containers carefully before addressing them again. "I'm sending these to the lab today with a priority marker. We should have results within 48 hours. She handed Sarah a care sheet and a business card. "If you notice any increased pain, bleeding, or other changes, call my office immediately. I've written my cell phone number on the back." In the car, Sarah finally broke down. 46 years of holding everything inside, and it all came pouring out in the parking lot of a medical building in small-town Michigan. "I was so scared, James," she sobbed. Every day in that field hospital, I was terrified. Boys came in torn apart, and we tried to put them back together, but we couldn't save them all. We couldn't save most of them. James held her, letting her cry against his shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked gently. "Because when I came home, everyone either treated veterans like we were monsters or looked at us with pity. I didn't want either. I just wanted to be normal. To be Sarah the teacher, not Sarah the nurse who saw boys die." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. And there was an incident. Near Quang Tri, a village. Our unit received orders that didn't make sense. There were civilians, women, and children. I tried to help them, tried to stop what was happening. That's when the shooting started. "Is that when you were hit?" Sarah nodded. "I never knew if that bullet came from our side or theirs. The field medic dug out what he could, said the rest was superficial. But I felt it go deep, James. I always knew something was still in there." The call from Dr. Winters came 2 days later, earlier than expected. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've received preliminary results from the lab," the doctor said, her voice controlled but urgent. "I'd like you to come in tomorrow morning. I've consulted with Dr. Michael Thornton, an oncologist. We'd like to do a complete excision of the growth as soon as possible." "Is it cancer?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A pause. "The results show abnormal cells that share some characteristics with melanoma, but there are other findings that don't fit that diagnosis. We need to remove the entire growth and examine it thoroughly." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to James breathe beside her, feeling the weight of the growth on her back like a stone. Around 3 in the morning, she got up and retrieved the letter she'd written 20 years ago. She'd penned it during a particularly dark period, when nightmares of Vietnam had become so intense she could barely function. The letter was meant to explain everything: her service, the incident at Quang Tri, the guilt she'd carried for decades. She'd never found the courage to share it. But now, with surgery looming and an uncertain future ahead, she decided it was time. She left the letter on James's nightstand with a simple note: "Read this while I'm in surgery. It's time you knew everything." Act 3. The operation. The surgical suite was cold and sterile, the overhead lights harsh and unforgiving. Sarah lay on her side, draped and prepped, as the surgical team moved around her with practiced efficiency. She'd been given a local anesthetic and light sedation, but she was conscious, aware of every sound and movement. Dr. Winters' voice came from somewhere behind her. "Sarah, you're going to feel some pressure, but no pain. If anything becomes uncomfortable, let me know immediately." "Okay," Sarah managed, her voice tight with anxiety. The surgery began. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to focus on her breathing, trying not to think about what they were cutting out of her body. But the sounds were inescapable. The clinical whispers of the surgical team, the beep of monitors, the subtle snip of instruments. "Remarkable structure," Dr. Winters murmured after several minutes. "These fibrous extensions, they're following the facial planes deliberately, almost like roots." Dr. Thornton, the oncologist, leaned in closer. "I've never seen tissue architecture quite like this. It's almost organized, purposeful." Sarah's heart rate increased, the monitors beeping faster. Blood pressures rising slightly, the anesthesiologist reported. "Sarah, you're doing fine," Dr. Winters reassured her. "We're making excellent progress." More time passed. Sarah couldn't tell if it was minutes or hours. Then Dr. Winters' tone changed, sharpening with surprise. "There's something here, something metallic. Can you visualize it?" Dr. Thornton asked. "Partially. It's embedded in the center of the growth. The tissue has formed a complete cavity around it." Sarah's breath caught. The bullet. After all these years, Dr. Winters worked carefully, her instruments making tiny clicking sounds as she probed deeper. "I'm going to extract the foreign object now. Suction ready." A moment of tension. Then got it. Sarah heard the soft clink of metal against the specimen tray. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "That's not random shrapnel," Dr. Thornton said, his voice tight with surprise. "That's a bullet fragment." Then Nurse Patricia's scream shattered the surgical suite's calm. Sarah couldn't see what was happening, but she heard the clatter of instruments, heard Dr. Winters' sharp command. "Patricia, I need you to step back. Now." "What's happening?" Sarah managed to ask, panic flooding through her. "The tissue is responding to the removal," Dr. Winters said, her professional composure holding despite the evident shock in her voice. "Sarah, everything is under control. Just breathe." But Sarah could hear the tension in the room, could sense that something unprecedented was occurring. The growth on her back, the thing that had been part of her for 45 years, was reacting to being separated from the bullet fragment it had encased. "The tissue structure is collapsing and reforming," Dr. Thornton observed, his scientific curiosity evident. "It's like it was built specifically around that fragment." "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Winters admitted. "The body created this elaborate structure not just to isolate the foreign object, but to interface with it somehow." They worked for another 30 minutes, ensuring they'd removed all abnormal tissue with clean margins. Finally, Dr. Winters stepped back. "We're closing now, Sarah. You did beautifully." As they stitched her back together, Sarah felt tears sliding down her face. That bullet had been inside her for 45 years, a piece of the war she'd carried in silence, a physical reminder of the worst day of her life. And now it was gone. In the recovery room, Sarah woke slowly, her mind foggy from the anesthesia. James was there, holding her hand, his eyes red-rimmed. "Did you read it?" she asked, her voice raspy. He nodded. "The letter." "Yes." And James squeezed her hand gently. "I understand now. Why you never talked about it. Why you changed careers. Why you've had nightmares all these years." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "You tried to save those villagers. You stood up against orders that were wrong. You're not the monster you think you are, Sarah. You never were." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Winters entered, still in her surgical scrubs. She held a sealed specimen container. Inside, Sarah could see a small, corroded piece of metal. "This is what we removed from your back," Dr. Winters said, setting the container on the bedside table. A bullet fragment, approximately 45 years old based on its composition and corrosion. Sarah stared at it, this tiny piece of metal that had defined so much of her life. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Winters continued, her voice carrying a note of wonder. "The growth we removed wasn't simply cancerous tissue or a typical foreign body reaction. Your body created something extraordinary, a specialized biological structure that was actively filtering toxins from the bullet fragment. Instead of letting those metals poison you, your immune system built this elaborate filtration system around it." "So it was protecting me?" Sarah asked, struggling to understand. "In a way, yes. For 45 years, your body was preventing lead and copper poisoning. It's an adaptation we've never documented before." James looked between them. If it was protecting her, why did it suddenly become dangerous? Dr. Winters' expression grew serious. "That's what we need to monitor carefully. Sometimes these biological adaptations can become unstable over time. But for now, you're recovering well, and all the abnormal tissue has been removed." Act 4, the crisis. Sarah's first 2 days home were peaceful. She rested, took her medications, and allowed James to fuss over her. The surgical site was healing normally, no signs of infection. On the third morning, everything changed. James woke at dawn to find Sarah's side of the bed empty. He found her in the kitchen, sitting rigidly at the table, her face ashen and covered in a light sheen of sweat despite the morning chill. "Sarah," he approached cautiously, alarmed by her appearance. "My back," she gasped. "It's on fire. It never hurt before, but now." James immediately placed his palm on her forehead. She was burning up. "We're going to hospital. Right now." Emma met them at the emergency room. James had called her from the car, and she'd left Chicago immediately. As a physician herself, she took one look at her mother and went into professional mode. "Dad, help me get her shirt off. We need to see the surgical site." What they saw made them both inhale sharply. The incision, which had been healing normally just 12 hours earlier, was now angry and inflamed. The skin around the stitches had taken on a mottled appearance, areas of deep redness interspersed with pale, almost bloodless patches. Worse, there was distinct swelling that seemed to pulse slightly with each beat of Sarah's heart. "This isn't right," Emma said, her voice tight. "This is progressing way too fast for a normal infection." Dr. Winters arrived within 30 minutes of being called. She examined the site with growing concern, her fingers gentle but thorough as she probed the inflamed tissue. "This isn't a typical post-surgical infection," she said grimly. "I'm seeing an unusual inflammatory response pattern." She looked up at Emma. "We need to take her back to surgery immediately. There's something happening at the cellular level that we don't fully understand yet." Sarah's temperature climbed to 103.4. Her heart rate increased, the monitor beeping faster as her body fought an invisible enemy. "Mom," Emma said, gripping her hand. "They're going to fix this. You're going to be okay." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Always taking care of me, even now." As they prepped her for emergency surgery, Sarah looked at James with an intensity that belied her weakened state. "The metal box," she said urgently. "In my closet. The shoebox. There are things in there you need to see. My nursing credentials, photos from Vietnam. You need to understand the full story. You can show me yourself when you're better," James said, his voice breaking. "Promise me you'll look," Sarah insisted. "I promise." The second surgery was more extensive than the first. Dr. Winters and Dr. Thornton worked for hours, carefully cleaning out the infected tissue and taking samples for analysis. In the waiting room, James and Emma sat in tense silence. Emma made phone calls, arranged more time off from work. James stared at the wall, his mind replaying Sarah's words. "There are things in there you need to see." Finally, near midnight, Dr. Winters appeared. Her face was drawn with fatigue, but there was a spark of understanding in her eyes. "Sarah is in the ICU," she began. "She's stable, but on a ventilator to support her breathing while her body fights this infection." "What's causing it?" Emma asked, her medical training pushing through her personal fear. Dr. Winters sat down heavily. "We figured out. When we removed the bullet fragment and the growth, we disrupted a biological system that had been in place for 45 years. The specialized tissue was filtering toxins from the bullet, lead, copper, other metals. Without that filtration system, the surrounding tissue was suddenly exposed to accumulated metals it had never directly encountered. It went into shock. Like withdrawal, Emma said quietly. Exactly. Sarah's body had adapted to the presence of that bullet. It had built an entire biological infrastructure around it. Removing it saved her from potential cancer, but triggered this inflammatory cascade. Will she recover? James asked, the only question that mattered. Dr. Winters met his gaze. Now that we understand what's happening, we can treat it appropriately. We're supporting her immune system, chelating the metals, and treating the necrotic tissue. The next 48 hours are critical, but I'm hopeful. Sarah spent 3 days in the ICU. James rarely left her side, holding her hand, talking to her even though she couldn't respond. He told her about the garden he'd plant in spring, about the vacation they'd take when she recovered, about the 46 years of memories they'd made together. On the third night, as Emma dozed in a chair and James held vigil, Sarah's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. "Sarah?" James leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding his face. She couldn't speak around the ventilator tube, but she squeezed his hand, weak but deliberate. James's eyes filled with tears. "You're going to be okay," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Act 5. Healing. 2 weeks later, Sarah sat in a wheelchair on the hospital's garden terrace, breathing fresh air for the first time since her second surgery. The ventilator was gone, the worst of the infection beaten back. She was thin and weak but alive. Emma pushed the wheelchair while James walked beside them, his hand resting on Sarah's shoulder. "Dr. Winters says your case is unprecedented," Emma said. "She wants to present it at a medical conference, with your permission, of course. The way your body adapted to that bullet fragment could help other veterans." Sarah nodded slowly. If it helped someone else, then maybe all of this meant something. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the late winter sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, Sarah spoke. "James, did you look in that box? The one from my closet." "I did," he said softly. "I saw your nursing credentials, the photos of your unit, the Purple Heart." He paused. "I also found letters you'd written to the families of soldiers who died. Dozens of them. Letters you never sent." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell a mother that her son died calling for her? How do you tell a wife that her husband's last words were, "I love you," when you know she'll never hear his voice again? "You carried all of that alone," James said, his voice thick. "For 46 years, you carried those boys' deaths, that village, that bullet, all alone." "I didn't want to burden you," Sarah whispered. "Sarah." James knelt beside her wheelchair, taking both her hands in his. "Marriage means sharing everything, the good, the bad, the unspeakable. You didn't burden me. You shut me out." The words weren't accusatory, just honest. And in that honesty, Sarah finally understood what she'd lost by keeping her secrets. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize," James said. "Just promise me, no more secrets. Whatever time we have left, let's spend it knowing each other completely." Sarah nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. No more secrets. 6 months later, Sarah stood on her front porch, standing on her own now, strong enough to navigate the stairs without help. The summer air was warm and sweet with the scent of the roses she'd planted in May. Inside, James was on the phone with their travel agent, finalizing arrangements for a trip they'd decided to take together. A veterans reconciliation program in Vietnam. American veterans returning to meet with Vietnamese veterans to see the country through different eyes to find some measure of peace. Dr. Winters' research had been published, and Sarah's case had helped identify dozens of other veterans carrying similar foreign objects, their bodies creating extraordinary biological adaptations. The findings had changed how the VA approached treatment for aging veterans with embedded shrapnel. Emma had taken a part-time position at the medical center in Millfield, wanting to be closer to her parents. She'd also started volunteering with a veteran support group, using her mother's story to help others open up about their own hidden wounds. Sarah touched the scar on her back, still sensitive but healed. The bullet was gone, removed and studied and understood. But its legacy remained, in the medical knowledge gained, in the family bond strengthened, in the secrets finally shared and forgiven. That evening, as Sarah and James sat on the porch watching fireflies dance across the darkening lawn, Sarah spoke softly. "I spent 45 years trying to forget Vietnam," she said, "trying to bury that part of myself so deep that it couldn't hurt anymore. But it was there all along, wasn't it? Growing, changing, waiting to be acknowledged." James took her hand. "And now?" Sarah smiled. A real smile, free of the shadows that had haunted her for so long. "Now I think maybe I can forgive that scared young nurse who made mistakes and saw terrible things. Maybe I can accept that she was part of who I became, the good and the bad together. That's all any of us can do," James said. "Accept all of ourselves, even the parts we wish were different." They sat in the gathering darkness, two people who'd spent 46 years together, yet were only now truly beginning to know each other. The bullet was gone, but its gift remained. The truth it had forced into the light, the healing that came from finally sharing the unbearable weight of the past. Sarah's story is a reminder that the secrets we bury don't disappear. They grow beneath the surface, shaping us in ways we don't always understand. Sometimes it takes a crisis to bring them into the light, to force us to confront what we've been carrying alone. Whether you serve in a war, live through trauma, or simply carry stories you've never shared, remember, healing begins when we stop hiding, when we trust the people who love us with the whole truth of who we are and who we've been. It's never too late to unburden yourself, never too late to heal. Have you ever discovered that something you kept hidden for years was actually longing to be shared? Or have you experienced the relief of finally telling your complete truth to someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below.